Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Glad you're here. We got a lot more coronavirus talk today. We'll get some updates, then we'll go a little deeper. Hopefully give some analysis that you're not getting anywhere else. So quick update, Israel has now mandated a 14-day quarantine for anyone coming into the country. So if you were planning on a business trip for the weekend or go and see the sights for a week in Israel, that's canceled. You're not doing it. You have to prove, when you get there, you have to prove that you can go somewhere for 14 days and self-quarantine. Pretty amazing. So Israel's essentially shut down from outsiders. Italy, yesterday, they extended the quarantine to not just the northern 25% of the country, but the entire country is now under quarantine. Here in America, and they're a little bit ahead of us over on that side of the world. In America, we're a little bit behind, but we're getting there. We're getting there. A school district outside Sacramento, it's the 5th largest in the state. They have 9 high schools, 63,000 students, K through 12. They've shut down, and then Fulton County in Georgia, which is the largest county in Georgia, they've shut down as well. They say for the week, but I'm sure that's going to be extended for many more weeks. Out here in Southern California, Coachella has decided to move till October, so there's going to be a lot more of this. As soon as one person at your kid's school or one person at your work gets coronavirus, then the entire district's going to be shut down. And your entire business is going to be shut down. So prepare for that. And if you think I'm fear-mongering, because that's one of the big concerns. Like, oh, don't fear-monger. I'm not. I'm not making this up about Italy and Israel. And we got some pictures here. I'm not, like, this isn't, like, there's this idea that this is something that's happening way over there. But it's more than over there. Like, sometimes we have a tough time, Americans, because, America, wrapping our head around the other side of the world and things that are happening over there. We almost watch it like it's a movie. Not real life, it's just a movie over there. And nothing in that movie is going to affect us over here. But no, obviously, that's right. Those countries are just a couple weeks in front of us here. Another interesting factor that I think is causing us to operate differently is we have been conditioned is a good word. We've been conditioned to operate in a 24-hour drive-by media world. So we heard about coronavirus a month and a half ago for the first time, and nothing's happened. So that must be no big deal, because we give everything like a day to hit, right? That's how we think. So let's say we heard about coronavirus on Monday and how it's going to be really bad, and then Tuesday rolls around and everything's fine. So that was overblown, no big deal. Viruses, but also things in general, but viruses certainly don't operate on a 24-hour cycle. You got to give it a minute. It takes 5 days before you even show any symptoms once you have it. But we've been so conditioned for things to happen like right away that this thing's taking weeks, and we're not, we're past it already, right? Anything that happens in America, you can, most things are a 1-day media cycle attention. Sometimes you'll get a 2, and very rarely you'll get a 3-day media cycle thing before we move on to the next. And we just don't have patience for things like coronavirus, which takes months before it's going to come its way to America and then eventually hit really big. So anyway, I'm not selling panic, just talking about what's happening. My posture still, and how I'm going to talk about all this stuff moving forward until further notice, is the fear of the coronavirus is likely to be as or more destructive than the virus itself. We talked a good deal about that yesterday. You can check out yesterday's show on the First's YouTube page. The fear of coronavirus is likely to be as or more destructive than the virus itself. Read a post from an infectious disease specialist who has worked all over, worked at inner city hospitals, worked in the poorest slums of Africa, worked with patients with HIV, TB, SARS, measles, you name it, all the stuff. And here's what this doctor said. With notable exception of SARS, and we're going to talk about SARS a little bit later up, we're going to talk about Ralph. We need to pray for Ralph. Who's Ralph? We're going to tell you coming up here who Ralph is. Ralph is maybe the most important person in the world right now, and we need to know more about Ralph. So we're going to talk about Ralph later. Anyway, Ralph and SARS have a connection. She says, with the notable exception of SARS, very little has left me feeling vulnerable, overwhelmed, or downright scared. And she says, I am not scared of COVID-19. And then she talks about concern for elderly people, obviously. But here, this is good. What I am scared about is the loss of reason and wave of fear that has induced the masses of society into a spellbinding spiral of panic, stockpiling obscene quantities of anything that could fill a bomb shelter adequately in a post-apocalyptic world. I'm scared of the N95 masks that are stolen from hospitals and urgent care clinics where they're actually needed for frontline healthcare providers and instead are being donned in airports, malls, and coffee lounges, perpetuating even more fear and suspicion of others. I'm scared that our hospitals will be overwhelmed. We'll talk about that coming up in a little bit. And those with heart failure, emphysema, pneumonia, and stroke will pay the price for overfilled ER waiting rooms with only so many doctors and nurses to assess. I'm scared that travel restrictions will become so far-reaching that weddings will be canceled, graduations missed, and family reunions not materialize. I'm scared those same epidemic fears will limit trade, harm partnerships, business and otherwise, and ultimately culminate in a global recession. Right, so that's what I mean by the fear of it all, more so than it itself. And I think that's all pretty accurate. But there are some realities as well. Yesterday, we talked about exponential growth and how our brains can't comprehend exponential growth. And we talked about what we're going to do, and I don't know, really, tens is the best we can come up with so far, but what we're going to do when the available hospital beds in America are full, and there are no more available hospital beds. So in short, there's about 1 million hospital beds in America. 650,000 are filled at any given moment, which leaves 330,000 open at any given moment. If coronavirus spreads at the current rate that it's been spreading, by May, there'll be 2 million cases of coronavirus in America by May, and it'll double every week. And if 10% of those cases are serious enough to be hospitalized, then all the hospital beds are going to be filled up by about May 8th. So beginning of May, all the hospitals in America are going to be filled. And if the variables change a little bit there, so if not 10%, but 5% of the cases are worthy of hospitalization, then that buys us another week or so, right? But we're still like April, May is still when that's going to be a big problem. Again, not tomorrow, right? So anyone's like, oh, hospitals are fine. I was at the hospital yesterday. There's empty beds. Yeah. Soon, not, right? So are hospitals prepared for this? Same with surgical masks, as this doctor just talked about. There's really no reason for someone to wear a surgical mask unless you are sick, right? The N95 masks that everyone's talking about, they prevent you from spreading it, right? It doesn't stop you from getting it. Water droplets in the air and on surfaces that we talked about yesterday. Remember yesterday we talked about how long coronavirus can live on different surfaces and different temperatures, whatever. Water droplets can still get in your eye. So unless you're walking around wearing a mask and goggles, don't wear anything, don't worry about it. If you are sick, then you should be wearing a mask to keep it from spreading. But we have a national stockpile of 12 million N95 masks and 30 million surgical masks. All right, let's think about that for a second. That's super interesting. Where are they? I got a ton of questions about our nation's stockpile of N95 masks, which are a thing I didn't even know existed till last week. Where are these things? Who decided that we needed that many? How long have they been sitting there? Who decides who gets them and when? Like, who's in charge of the stockpile? And what other things do we have stockpiled? I didn't know we had surgical masks stockpiled. And now I'm thinking, well, what other things are stockpiled? I have no idea. We got to get to the bottom of those answers, and we will, because I'm super curious about that. Anyway, if each healthcare worker in America got one mask per day, we as a nation would burn through that N95 stockpile in 2 days. Okay, so here's our emergency stockpile, and you get one a day, and that's not appropriate. You should get many more. You should get one every use, not one a day. But if you give every person one a day, every medical professional one a day, then we're gone in 2 days. And we can't ramp up production because like 80% of them are made in China, which is something we'll continue to talk about, supply chains. There's another factory in France, which is a really interesting story that we'll get to as well. And they're ramping up production as fast as possible. But they can't do a lot because a lot of the raw materials to make the masks come from China. So on Friday, we have our big China special we're going to be doing from lots of different angles, not just a coronavirus special. But we're going to talk about supply chains, which coronavirus has revealed, right? We need to, this could be a good thing that comes from all this, that we need to expand our supply chains away from putting all of our eggs in the basket of the Chi-Coms for things like this that happen when we can't rely on them. And should we ever rely on them anyway? Anyway, So like we talk about panic and whatever, well, we don't have any surgical masks. We don't have any N95 masks, and that's not great. Now you play that same game with other things. That's just surgical masks. Do the same math with saline drip bags and ventilators. Like we're not prepared for that. People need to keep going to the hospital for other reasons, and we're not prepared to take care of them still. People are still giving birth. Where are you going to do that when your hospital is overrun by people with coronavirus? So here's the conclusion here. This doctor's concluding. Undeserved panic does no one any good, but neither does ill-informed complacency. It's wrong to soothe the public by saying, well, only 2% of people will die. People aren't adequately grasping the national and global systematic burden wrought by this swift moving of a disease. So it's both, right? And I feel like we have this interesting paradigm in America where we're too politicized, right? If Republicans, or let's say Trump says it's no big deal, then the Democrats have to make it a huge deal. If a Republican says it's a big deal, then the Democrats have to come back and say it's not a big deal, right? And vice versa. Everyone's trying to make it a binary thing. Many things can be true at the same time. In this circumstance, it's incredibly important. Let me bring it back to America here. There's this move now to shut down universities. You're seeing more and more of that. So Stanford, they were the first to cancel classes and all in-person classes. And they've canceled a bunch of events. So like Admit weekend, so all the incoming freshmen visit campus for the weekend, like that's gone. There's no tours, stuff like that. No study abroad programs. So Stanford canceled because one professor has coronavirus, and it's in Santa Clara, which has the second highest outbreak in all of California. University of Washington's also canceled classes because an employee tested positive, but they said they were going to cancel classes anyway already. What's interesting about colleges canceling classes is, like, I don't know how many people are at Stanford, 10,000. You can cancel classes, but there's still 10,000 people going to frat parties, right? There's still 10,000 people playing beer pong. You walk into a frat house, and it's like, in 2 minutes, everyone's got coronavirus. One person walks in, everyone's swapping spit. It's just that everyone. So you can cancel classes, but that's not going to stop the spread in a very contained area. But anyway, these places are canceling things because one person got it. So there's a model out there, and we've talked all the time about how models are failed just by their very nature, right? Because the predictions that a model makes, maybe it's a climate change model, right? The predictions are only as accurate as the model is accurate, and you can't make a model accurate. There's too many variables at play. That being said, we work with the best we got here. So someone ran all the numbers, and they made a model here, and you can plug in your own numbers, right? So this guy did San Francisco. So San Francisco's got a population of 884,000 people, which isn't quite right because you got people coming in, right? Which changes, but let's just go with that. 884,000 people. There's 200 known cases, and you take the size of a company. So let's say a company has 1,000 people. And you also assume that the doubling time is every 7 days. Some say 3, some say 7, somewhere around there. The point of all that is you plug all that in, and out pops the chance of a company getting the disease, one person with a disease. So the chance of a company, the size of 1,000 people, having one person have coronavirus, this week, it's about 20%. Next week, it's about 36%. And it grows from there, and it grows more and more every week, right? So right now, you got a 20% chance of someone at your work, like at Stanford, right? Stanford had a 20% chance, and they got it. They lost. One person has it. They have to shut down the campus. Your work, you're maybe in that 80% right now. No one at your work has it. Well, give it another week, and then give it another week. And then by then, someone's going to have it, and then your business is going to have to shut down, and the schools are going to have to shut down. Right? Because once one person gets it, they come to the office, almost everyone's going to get it, and then it's unlikely that you won't get it. So businesses are going to have to shut down. So that's probably in the next 2 weeks. I hope none of this comes across as spreading panic. That's not my intent at all. I hope I don't look panicked, right? It's just preparing. And not so much preparing for the virus, although yes, but preparing for people's and government's reaction to the virus. Because although it's been coming slowly, it's going to happen fast. As I said, it's going to slow, and then coming up next, I want to talk about mayors and governors and their difficult decision to shut down cities and like shut down mass transportation, close schools. Like the people in charge at government are faced with a tough decision right now. And they don't want to, no mayor wants to be the first one to shut down their city, right? So I want to talk about that incentive next, but I'll leave you with Nassim Taleb's quote, he's big on this right now. He's of the school of thought that this is going to be a very big deal, coronavirus. And he had a line, he said, the lesson is, those who panicked early don't have to panic today. So I'm not saying we got to panic at all, but you should get prepared now, because then you won't have to panic later. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Cider Crusaders, you've heard, and we've made comparisons with what's going on now to the Spanish flu. Remember we had a historian on last week, who wrote an amazing book about the Spanish flu. Just to talk about comparisons and similarities and differences. One major difference is our healthcare system and just sanitation in general is vastly improved over the last 102 years, and that's very, very important. But one similarity socially is mayors today, governors, are faced with the same decision that mayors faced back in 1918. They're faced with how seriously do we take this and what do we do, right? Do we shut down our city? The best way, and this is still true, and this I think will always be true, the best way to stop the spread of any virus like this is to stop all major public events. Just is. But no mayor wants to be the first mayor to stand up and shut down their city. Right? So I'm here in San Diego. Kevin Faulkner's our mayor. Kevin Faulkner doesn't want to stand up and say, all right, everyone, we'll shut down the airport. We'll shut down the whole airport. No school, no movie theaters, no concerts, no restaurants, no one in or out. The whole place is shut. No one wants to do that. No mayor wants to be the guy to do that. They can do that in China because they're run by a dictator. And if you don't abide by it, then you get shot in the head. We can't do that in America. And no mayor wants to be the first. And that was a problem during the Spanish flu in 1918. Summer of 1918, the city of Philadelphia decided to hold a parade for the war. They wanted to boost morale during World War I, and they wanted to convince people to buy war bonds so they could pay for this thing. So they had a big parade. Whole thing, marching bands, Boy Scouts. John Philip Sousa was there, the king of the march. 200,000 people lined the streets. 200,000 people lined the streets for 2 miles. And people warned the mayor and the city officials of Philadelphia, don't do this. This is a really, really bad idea. You don't want this many people in such a small area. But they did it anyway. And 2 days after the parade, the city's public health director said that the epidemic is now in the civilian population. The next day, every single bed in the entire city, all their hospitals were full. They had 31 hospitals in Philadelphia. Every single bed was full. That was just 3 days later. By 7 days later, 2,600 people died. And the next week, 4,500 people were killed. Ultimately, 12,000 people died in Philadelphia. 12,000 people. The morgues were completely full. One morgue had a capacity of 36 people, and there were hundreds of bodies stacked up outside. The entire city stunk. Local breweries offered to keep dead people inside their giant refrigerators. Prisoners were ordered to dig holes and build caskets. You get the idea here? So again, I want to speak up. Coronavirus is not Spanish flu. All right, Spanish flu is very, you get the symptoms within hours, and it was bad, right? And it took down young people as well, right? Coronavirus is worse in some ways, right? Because it spreads without you even knowing you have it, right? So then it could affect even more vulnerable people, but they're still different. 12,000 deaths in Philadelphia, that was 1% of the population at the time. So it had a death rate of 1%, what people think coronavirus does as well. Anyway, I bring this up because Philadelphia was warned not to do it, but they did it anyway, because that's a tough decision to make, especially during wartime, right? They wanted to do it for good reason. There's other cities that decided not to do things like this, and they had a much lower death rate because of it. One newspaper, again, there's nothing really new under the sun. This is a newspaper editorial in Philadelphia back in 1918 talking about, criticizing people who didn't want to have the parade, right? They say, what are you trying to do? And I'm going to read this in 1918 voice. What are you trying to do? Scare everybody to death? The fear of influenza is creating a panic. An unreasonable panic that will be promoted, we suspect, by the drastic commands of the authorities. Steer clear of it, therefore, and talk of cheerful things, of health, for instance, instead of disease. So you get a lot of that today as well, right? Like, everyone's just instituting panic. Keep it going. Keep Coachella going. Keep the schools open. No big deal. Same thing. Now in Philadelphia, that guy was wrong, that editorial, and they had the parade, everyone got sick, and then everything shut down after that, but it was too late. So I will admit this is a very, very difficult decision, and there's no incentive for mayors to do it. There's no incentive because if you shut down the city to stop the spread of the virus, and it works, right? So you said no movie theaters, no concerts, no restaurant, right? You shut down the city. And think of the economic consequences. That's terrible, right? But you shut down the city, and it works. It stops the spread of the virus. Very few people will get it, right? Then the reaction that people are going to come back and say, you didn't need to do all this. You didn't need to shut down the city and quarantine everyone. Look, no one got it. What a waste. And the mayor would come back and be like, no one got it because we shut down the city. But no one, right? So you have an incentive to wait and wait and wait. And then there's an incentive to wait till other mayors do it so you can kind of pass the blame on them if it doesn't go well. No one wants to be the first. So every school district is going to wait until someone gets it, and then it's going to be too late because if someone knows they have it, they've had it for a long time and it's already been spread. So scientists, we don't have time to go over all this now, but scientists and researchers, they looked at 43 different cities during 1918, 1919. And I'll just give you the very short of this. They broke down their response, the city's response, into 3 different controls. Mandatory quarantines, school closure, and shutting down of public events. So 3 different things that a city could do. The faster a city implemented these bans, or these controls, the much lower the contraction rate and the death rate. And it's nearly to a T. Faster they acted, the lower the death rate. And that's true here today as well. It's just no one wants to go first. Coming up next, I want to talk about Ralph. Ralph is maybe the most important person in your life today. And you don't even know him. I didn't know him until yesterday, but we all got to know Ralph. We'll show a picture of Ralph. We'll talk about Ralph. Who is Ralph? We'll do that next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Slater Crusaders, I want to show you a picture of a man who is maybe the most important person in your life right now. It's Ralph. We got a picture of Ralph? There he is. Ralph. I love Ralph. I never seen Ralph till yesterday, and I already feel like we're old friends. Ralph's an incredibly important person. Dr. Ralph Barrick, if you have a minute to daydream today, think of all the people behind the scenes who are working really hard to save humanity. That's a little dramatic. Who are working really hard to stop this virus, right? From the people who are working overnight shifts to make the surgical masks, to the researchers and scientists who are working to make the test kits, to the people, like if things get really crazy here, someone's gonna still have to deliver food to grocery stores, I presume, right? And like people who are still gonna expose themselves and be out there so that we can be quarantined, that we can still live a somewhat normal, right? There's all these people who are gonna be working behind the scenes, and we need to be super grateful for them. And it's people like that who never get any attention. They don't get attention when they're doing it or when they're super successful at the end of it, right? And then politicians swoop in and take all the credit for saving everyone. That annoys me. But the rest of us can go on with our lives, especially with people like Ralph, right? We're going with our lives, and there's going to be a vaccine one day for this. And we're going to say, well, of course someone found a vaccine for this. Of course that happened. No, not of course at all. I think of someone like Alan Turing. He was the code breaker, the Nazi code breaker during World War II. And you look at the life of Alan Turing and you're like, well, of course the British would be able to break the Nazi codes. No, not guaranteed at all. Like super unlikely that we would be able to break the Nazi codes. And thank God we did. Thank you for Alan Turing. So check out this report right here. We got two reports here. Let me pull it up here real quick. These are from two medical journals from back in 2015 and 2016. The key line here is, this one is on the bottom left-hand portion of that screen there. Studies have identified sequences of closely related SARS-like viruses circulating in Chinese bat populations that may pose a future threat. That was from 2015. That was a medical journal in 2015. And then the second one, we have another one here. This is from 2016. Coronavirus has the ability to, so that's interesting because you're thinking, well, coronavirus is new. You've heard that and you've thought that. I've thought that. It's not. It's not new. We've known about it for quite a while. This is 2016. Coronavirus has the ability to directly infect and may undergo limited transmission in human populations. It seems the only thing wrong there was the limited transmission. It seems like very widespread transmission. But the point is directly infect humans is the key. Both of those papers were by Dr. Ralph Baric, this guy, that guy that we already showed the picture of, Ralph. Ralph works at UNC Chapel Hill's Gillings School of Global Public Health. And he's been researching viruses since the 90s, particularly SARS and MERS. SARS was 2002, MERS was 2012. And since January, he and 30 other scientists at UNC have been working in an airtight laboratory, wearing full bodysuits, working from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. every single day, trying to find a vaccine for coronavirus. Thanks, Ralph. Super grateful for that. We asked Ralph if he could come on the show today. And gosh, golly, he was a little busy. We didn't even ask him. It wouldn't bother him. The first human sample that they received was on February 6th from a patient up in Washington. And they've been all hands on deck. Well, before that, but certainly since that. And they've been growing different strains. I don't even know if that's the right word for that, but they've been growing it and testing it and seeing what drugs work to kill it. They've tested 200,000 drugs against SARS and MERS, which are all in the same family. SARS, MERS, and coronavirus, they're all connected. So because Ralph has already done so much testing, we got a little bit of a head start with coronavirus. SARS, by the way, SARS, little background, SARS came from bats. MERS came from camels. Maybe you've heard the word zoonotic. Have you heard that word in the last couple of days? Zoonotic. It means that's a disease that spread from animals to humans. So SARS caught the world by a bit of surprise. That one kind of came out of nowhere, but scientists are now a little bit ahead of coronavirus because of SARS and because of the research that's been done since SARS. In fact, there's a team out of Texas at the Texas Christian Hospital. There's a center there for vaccine development. And in 2016, they tried to make a vaccine for coronavirus in 2016. But it was 14 years after SARS, right? SARS spread through China, killed 770 people. Not a huge deal, didn't really affect anything here in America. And also it was 14 years ago. So they couldn't get any funding. So this team out of Texas, they tried. They went around, they brought people in to try and fund this. We gotta get this vaccine, but they couldn't make the case. And I get that, right? If someone said, and I don't know how much it cost, I don't know how much they were looking for, say $100 million. I don't know what it costs at all, I have no idea. But let's say they say, hey, I need $100 million from you to come up with this is in 2016, so 4 years ago, to come up with a coronavirus vaccine. You'd be like, no. What's the coronavirus? Oh, well, it could be similar to SARS. SARS, you mean like the thing that was 14 years ago that's gone? No, there's got to be other things we could spend $100 million on other than this. And like that's a tough one. Like I would argue that that's kind of a rational decision to not give money for that. I don't know. It could go either way, right? The truth is humans are really bad at assessing threats. Our brains are really, really bad at assessing risk. Maybe we could talk about that another day. But most people looked at that and they looked at SARS and MERS, and they said, great, the worst is over. We did it. Humans win. We beat SARS, we beat MERS, that's awesome. And this guy out of Texas, he's saying, no, you fools. You didn't beat it. That was a warning of what's to come. We have different strands of it still to come, and we need to get a vaccine now to protect us from that. I don't want to be dramatic with this example. Please take this example for the intent of it. The 1993 World Trade Center bombing and USS Cole, you can look at those and say, yeah, we did it. We beat the terrorists. But no, those were precursors to something much bigger. Maybe a better analogy would be you feel an earthquake. And you look around, you're like, oh, everything's good. All the buildings are still standing. Everyone's safe. But that's not it. That's the warning of a bigger one that's still to come. And that's these doctors, that's their point about SARS and MERS, right? Hey, we beat SARS, we beat MERS. No, that's the beginning. That's a precursor of still what's to come. And heck, who knows? Maybe coronavirus is still a precursor of something that's still to come. You could never tell. And it's a difficult thing to make a big investment on because it could be completely unnecessary, or it could save humanity from a massive pandemic that kills 50 million people. You don't know. I share that because we could have had a vaccine made already. I'm not blaming anyone. Not blaming anyone. Because who knows if it would have been necessary. Who knows if it would have even worked. But now they're working overtime. And I'm grateful for them. During World War II, there were a lot of heroes on the battlefield. And we pay attention to those men, as we should, rightfully so. But we can't forget the scientists and the engineers and all the people in the background, right? The people who designed the airplanes, who developed the bomb, et cetera, that the code breakers who won the war as well. And similarly here, we got a lot of people that we see, a lot of politicians trying to get FaceTime and make the right decisions and people in the public and people you're gonna see, but it's people like Ralph who are doing some really, really important work in the background. So let's pray for people like Ralph. Not to put too much pressure on you, Ralph, but we're praying for you. Hope we come up with a vaccine quick. Coming up next, we're gonna change gears here a little bit. I wanna talk about old Joe. So we got a, primary tonight. And this could be the end of the whole thing. So we're talking about Joe Biden coming up next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Steady Crusaders, changing gears a little bit. We're going to keep talking coronavirus as the weeks go on, so prepare for that. But it's not the only thing happening right now. So we got a primary tonight, and Joe Biden is probably going to win Michigan by quite a bit, it looks like. So we'll see. But it's not only Michigan. We've got a couple other states that are out there as well. People are going to pay attention a lot of attention to Mississippi, but there's an East Coast bias against some of the West Coast states. So Washington is actually a super important state for a bunch of different reasons. We'll save the pre-analysis and wait until tomorrow to see if it's relevant or not. You know, if one of them blows the other one out, that doesn't even matter anyway. But we'll keep an eye on Washington for you as well. Did you see Kamala Harris yesterday or the other day endorsed Biden in like this weird hostage style endorsement video? It was super weird. We're not going to play it because, you know, whatever. But it's super phony, right? And you know it's phony because she goes into like this sing-songy, because Joe Biden cares about the people and he will unify the people. She does like this like song and dance thing. It's so phony. Quick note on this before we get to Joe. I understand that if you're in a primary, you're going to attack your opponents and then there's got to be some unifying at the end. Totally understand that. That's part of the game. But Kamala attacked Joe Biden for a very specific reason. Do you remember? For supporting racist policies that hurt black people. And that was her whole thing, like, and that child was me. Remember that whole thing, right? And then she made this video while she's getting ready to march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge to commemorate the Civil Rights March, Bloody Sunday, right? And while she's doing that, she's supporting the guy who she said supported policies that hurt black people, right? That's specifically awkward. It's one thing if you don't like this, you attack this candidate for reasons, and then in the end you're like, well, you know, but to attack a candidate for a reason and then endorse him for the opposite of that reason. Like, that's weird. Remember Warren, the debate took down Bloomberg, right? And said, oh, Bloomberg's this horrible misogynist pig. But in the same attack, she said, I'll endorse whoever the nominee is. And you're like, like, how bad could, you're saying everybody's a terrible, horrible person who should never win, but then in the same sentence, you say, I'll endorse whoever the nominee is. You just undercut your entire argument. But I share that because if Warren and Bloomberg, they're both out. This illustration doesn't make sense. But if Warren this week came out and said, Bloomberg is the man to fight for women's rights, right? Like, no, like you can't go back specifically on that point, right? Does that make sense? It'd be one thing if it was, oh, well, here's all these things we disagree on, but I disagree with all these, or I agree with all these other things. So, all in all, he's the best man for the job. But to come back on that same point of attack and endorse for the opposite reason that you attacked him, like, that one makes no sense at all. And that's what Kamala did there. Anyway, Joe, if he wins Michigan by a lot, then he'll be the nominee. This is it. Florida's next week, but Sanders can't come back from all that, especially with, his pro-Cuba policies. There's weird delegate math in all the states today that, again, if it's relevant, we'll come back and do a segment on tomorrow, because there's a chance that if it's kind of close, then because you have to win congressional districts and they split the delegates and you can't, there may be a chance where the delegate tally doesn't change at all by the end of the day. So we'll worry about that tomorrow. If the reality is a different story than what the lamestream media is telling you, then we'll be sure to give you the truth on that one tomorrow. But Biden's probably going to be the guy tonight. Now, you're going to hear more and more the term cognitive decline. I'm sure you've already heard it already, right? Cognitive impairment when it comes to Joe Biden. And that's going to be a major talking point moving forward for the next couple months. And there's a lot of misinformation going on about this. It is a fact, it's a proven fact, no question about it, that for most people around the age of 70, if not earlier, but we'll go with 70, your brain starts to slow down. Certain things fade, your memory, your language skills, thinking, judgment, it all starts to fade slowly at around 70. It's all good, right? It's no problem. It's not weakness. I mean, I'm not going to hold it against a 75-year-old or a 90-year-old for forgetting certain things, right? It's part of life. It's to be expected. It's the circle of life, and hopefully to be taken with as much understanding and patience and somehow even joy as when, say, a 5-year-old's learning how to do things for the first time, right? Like, that is the circle of how it works. So it's fine. I'm not criticizing people over the age of 70 for forgetting things or whatever. But I'm not sure we should be electing really old people to be president of the United States. I don't know if that's a great thing that we're doing. If Biden, Sanders, or Trump win the 2020 election, which they probably will, right? Any of them would be the oldest person to ever give the inaugural address. So, this is a weird time that we're in. This is from Derek Thompson. He wrote a really good article about this in The Atlantic. He said all three were born in the 40s, before the invention of Velcro and the independence of India and Israel. Amazingly, check this fact out, each is currently older than any of the past 3 U.S. presidents. If through some constitutional glitch, which isn't even glitch because any of these guys could run for president again. You can't run for 2 successive terms, but you could, like Obama could run for president again. But anyway, if through some constitutional glitch, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, or Barack Obama jumped into the race at this very moment, each of them would become the youngest man in the contest. Isn't that wild? If Warren somehow won, she would be the oldest president ever. So this guy, Derek Thompson, he asked, why are presidential candidates getting so old? A good question. So a couple ideas. The first, mostly older people vote, and older people might prefer an older candidate, right? But that's not always the case. That's not the case in Europe. All right, England, the over 55 crowd outvotes the under 30 crowd by the largest margin in the world. But Boris Johnson is 55. Right, he's the prime minister, he's 55. Biden, Sanders, and Trump are older than the last 5 British prime ministers. So England's not electing super old people, even as their population is getting older. So it doesn't quite explain it. it's not just president either, right? The House Speaker, the House Majority Leader, the House Majority Whip, and the Senate Majority Leader are all over 75. So what's going on here? One reason that makes sense to me is, at least for president, but this wouldn't really explain like Nancy Pelosi, other than just these people are just super power hungry and they never want to let go of power. And we're living older than we were in the past. Maybe that's the biggest one. We're just living longer. And once you have power like Nancy Pelosi, like I don't understand Nancy Pelosi wanting to be Speaker of the House. Like give it up already. Just go. Like how can you be so arrogant to think that you're the only person who could possibly do this job? Just go be with your grandkids and your great-grandkids. Like go live the rest of your life. Why do you're so power hungry you can't let go of these reins of power? Like what's wrong with you? I think that's a major character flaw. But at least when it comes to running for president, older people are out of their prime earning age range. So like Jeff Bezos, for instance. Jeff Bezos, he's 56 right now. If he were to run for president, he would give up his peak earning years. And he doesn't want to do that. Where Trump and Bloomberg, those days are behind them. So they're like, well, I don't know. Let's just run for president. Right? Bloomberg would be like 80 when he was. So he's like, I'm not doing anything else. I might as well run for president. So I don't know. Maybe it's just it takes longer to get to rack up the accolades that people are looking for president. But that's not even right because I don't even think we're looking for accolades or credentials anymore. We're not looking for experience. We're looking for familiarity, if anything. Think about this. H.W. Bush was really the last president who was, this isn't the right word, like well-credentialed. That's not the right word, but you know what I'm saying? So he was a congressman and then the UN ambassador and then the head of the CIA and then vice president and president, right? If there were to be a way to rise the ranks to become president, like that's it. And he was the last one to do that because then you had Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton didn't do any of that. But then even Bill Clinton had more governing experience than George W. Bush. But even George W. Bush was a governor longer than Obama was senator. And then Obama was at least in government more than Trump, who has no political experience. Now, I like that Trump has no political experience. Don't get me wrong, but do you see how we're trending in that direction from H.W. Bush, who was a super credentialed person, down to someone with no, that's just the direction we're heading in. And I don't know what's next. I don't know what's after that. Anyway. That's neither here nor there. About Joe, he's going to do these rallies, and they're getting shorter and shorter. For his advisors are smart. He's going to keep slurring his words. He's going to keep saying nonsense, and people are going to say, what's going on? And then his supporters are going to say, oh, how dare you make fun of him? He's had a stutter since childhood. I'm like, no, not the stutter I'm talking about. I don't hear a stutter. I hear him saying, what was the clip the other day? He's like, we believe in, what was it? It was like, we're endowed, what was it? Something like, we're endowed by, the thing for the, and the, and the people. You're like, no, like that's not a stutter. So if you or anyone brings up his cognitive decline, it's some sort of unfair ageist attack, but it's a genuine question, especially when his campaign staff's goal is to limit his public appearances and make sure he talks as little as possible. You got to ask why. Freddie Gray, he wrote at the Spectator. He was at an event in New Hampshire with Biden. And he went over and he shook hands with Biden. And he says there was a lot going on, right? There was a big crowd of people and there was a whole thing, right? And here's his story. He said, Mr. Vice President, how, by the way, why do we keep calling, I don't know why we call him Mr. Vice President. I don't know why we call people who aren't senators anymore, we still call him Senator. Like, you're not that anymore. He's not Mr. Vice President. He's Joe. That never made sense to me when you call someone a title that they don't have anymore. Anyway. Mr. Vice President, how as president would you approach Brexit and Boris Johnson? That was the question. What? He said. I repeated the question, shouting this time. What? He said again, smiling. His dentures were brilliant, his eyes mad blue. He had no idea what I was talking about. I tried one last time, screaming Boris Johnson in his ear. Reminds me of Christmas Vacation. The blessing! Boris Johnson, I yelled in his ear. Somewhere deep in his psyche, something stirred. "Bori," he said. Then the emptiness returned, and he went to hug some old ladies. It's not fair to mock the elderly, and no doubt U.S. politicians have far more pressing matters on their mind than Brexit. But Joe Biden is emerging as the Democrat Party's choice to be the next leader of the free world, and he's clearly not all there. That's going to be the storyline moving forward. So just brace yourself for that. Trump is going to make that the storyline. Trump's people are going to make that the narrative of Sleepy Joe. It's going to turn into Sleepy Joe into some other, like, more severe version of that, like not all there Joe. And you compare that with Trump the other day, and you decide.
Well, I think that I just feel like a young man. I'm so young. I can't believe it. I'm the youngest person. I am a young, vibrant man. I look at Joe. I don't know about him. I don't know.
Is he too old?
I would never say anyone's too old, but I know they're all making me look very young, both in terms of age and I think in terms of energy. I think you people know that better than anybody.
That's great. I'm a young, vibrant man. He's 73. Be prepared for that talking point moving forward. And don't let the whole, he's had a childhood stutter. No, that's not what we're talking about. Friendly reminder again, Friday, we've got our big special on China. We're going to take it from a lot of different angles, not just coronavirus, but we're going to talk about the economy. We're going to talk about supply chains. I want to talk about monetary policy. Like, I hear people talk about monetary policy and devaluing of currency and all this stuff, and I'm just going to plead ignorant to that. And, like, I don't get it. I need someone really smart to explain this to me like I'm an idiot. So we're going to break stuff like that down. We've got a lot of different analysis of China. So that's going to be on Friday. So please join us for that. True story. Mike Slater right here on The First. We'll see you tomorrow.